Tami Mcdonald is the founder of Brookstone Wealth Management, a woman-led financial planning and wealth management firm located in Columbus, Georgia. Tami is a certified financial planner practitioner with over 3 decades of financial and investment experience. Welcome, Tami.
Thank you, David.
So let's talk about planning for couples, especially with estate planning and being prepared for somebody passing and what the survivor needs to do.
Right.
So what's the top tip you have for people just to plan ahead for something like this happening?
Communication.
Oh, you've got 3 for me. Okay, good. All right. I only wanted 1. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so important. It's as a couple, you've got to understand what income you have coming in, what would happen with that income should something happen to one of you, or when something happens to one of you.
Right.
Typically, you don't pass away at the same time. And you've got to understand your assets. What are the assets that you have and how those assets are designated as far as the beneficiaries go and the titling of the assets.
We need to do all this yesterday. Right?
Yes.
And because death can come suddenly.
Right.
Okay? And, people, they know somebody that something's happened to.
Yeah.
And of course, when we went through COVID, people knew somebody that had, something had happened with them. So it's just the reality of the world we live in.
Yeah.
You mentioned a lot of things. So how do you get people talking about this as a couple when you work with them? Is it like, look, here's a checklist of things you've got to talk about? How can we as planners encourage them to have these conversations?
Well, early on in my career, I had a situation where a lady came in to see me, panicked, crying, devastated. They were planning a long trip. He was a gentleman, opened the door for her, put her in the vehicle, went around back, put the grandbaby in the baby seat, and then walked around the van and dropped dead of a heart attack.
Wow.
And she went from $72,000 a year in income to $12,000 a year in income.
Was that a surprise to her?
That was a huge surprise to her. She had no idea he had a pension, and she always thought that it had survivorship with the pension. He, come to find out, took 100% payout with the pension, and so
Which meant she gets nothing.
She got nothing.
Because they gave him and them more income while he was alive.
That's exactly right.
If he had taken a joint, they would have gotten less.
That's right.
Okay, so he was betting he was going to live a long time.
He was betting that he was going to live a long time, which most of us do.
Sure.
And then the situation with Social Security. A lot of people don't understand how Social Security works, and you're not getting that spouse's other benefit.
Right.
You're made right on the portion that you're getting. If
You're
you're getting
gonna get the
less,
greater of.
you're going to get the greater of,
Right.
not the 2. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So to get people motivated, maybe first are these stories, but I think that people also need to understand how their financial plan, what it looks like together, and then if one of them passes.
Right, yes.
And I think that's real important.
That's very important. And we always run scenarios. And it's hard. It's hard to sit there with a client. I use an interactive tool, and so actually on my big screen, I show clients,
people don't like seeing that in print.
They don't like to see it in print, no.
Yeah.
But actually real life of, okay, if one lives to 95 and the other dies at 70, or the other dies at 75 or 80, and we run different scenarios so that they completely understand what that looks like. Yes, your expenses reduce if one of the spouse pass away, but it doesn't cut in half.
No.
You know that, David.
No, not
yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
2 can live a lot cheaper than 1.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
There's a lot of other factors, and I think these are, they're things that people need to be very careful with. Things like beneficiary payouts and making choices about how they're going to receive money or claim a life insurance, or maybe they've got an annuity, or all of those things. They need to be careful because those choices can have a big impact on their future financial position and the taxes.
They certainly can.
Yeah.
Yes, they certainly can. And what we see happen so many times as well is when one spouse passes away, especially if it's quickly and there hasn't been a lot of opportunity for pre-planning, although there should be,
Right.
because we should have already done that.
Sure.
But when there's not, you run into situations where accounts are frozen, where death certificates are not available, especially we've seen that with COVID.
Oh, absolutely.
When some counties, it's 2-3 weeks, sometimes a month before a death certificate's available. So you've got to have you've got to have assets that you can get to no matter what the situation.
So
And
joint
then-
accounts.
Yes.
How about dealing with debt and how that figures into survivorship?
Yeah. You've got to understand where your debt is, how much debt you have, how that debt's structured, how it's titled, what would happen with that debt after one passes away. Again, we don't need to stick our head in the sand with these
Right.
things. We've got to talk about them. We've got to, and prior to retiring, if you're in an opportunity to have a pension, how that pension's going to be structured. Prior to retiring, looking at your accounts, trying to see how they are structured, looking at beneficiaries, who the beneficiaries are, making sure that you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's.
And really, it's with with every aspect of your financial life.
It is with every aspect.
We've got to touch all those.
Absolutely.
All right. And how they change or are affected by the death of one of the spouses.
That's exactly right.
All right. That's very
exactly
good. That's
right.
very helpful.
Yes.
How about for blended families?
Ooh, that gets touchier. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And you have so many blended families these days. But
All of this becomes even more important, right?
More important.
Ownership
yes.
of accounts, beneficiaries.
Making sure your estate documents are in place, living wills, power of attorneys, healthcare.
Surrogates and all
Yes,
that. Yeah.
yes. You've got to make sure that all of that's in place, and that is very important with all situations, but especially in blended situations. And you've got to have communication. I mean, even with a blended family, you've got to have communication with the husband and spouse, but also with the children, especially if there's children from both sides.
Which a lot of times there are.
Yes, a lot of times there are. And it turns into, unfortunately, fights or lawsuits. And if that happens, then those assets are tied up for even more years.
Yeah.
And so it's a snowball effect if you don't.
Well, back to how we started: communicate.
Communicate.
All right, very
Absolutely.
good, Tami Mcdonald, thank you.
Thank you, David.
If you would like more information about the topics and our guests featured in this series, please visit our website at PlanStrongerTV.com. Also, if you have a question you would like David to answer, please send it to questions@PlanStrongerTV.com.